Go big or go home.
Anybody nodding the head on that beat? Welcome in to Go Big or
Go
Go
home.
home.
Okay, folks. Well, first off, I'm Zora Stephenson. She's Meghan McKeown. He's Robbie Hummel. We're back in preview mode here. Conference tournaments are done. Brackets are out, and everybody's scrambling to talk about what they think is going to happen. Before we do that, we've got to give the Big Ten men's tournament its time to shine on the podcast. Wow. Talk about upsets, talk about what we didn't think was going to happen. Robbie, break it all down for us.
Yeah, Illinois, despite I don't think ever playing like a full 40 minutes of good basketball, found a way to win the Big Ten tournament, which I think kind of speaks to their talent level, but also speaks to what I think kind of is scary come a single elimination tournament of just they have stretches where Brad Underwood is legitimately cursing the team out in the huddle. And I ran into Grant Hill in the back hallway of the Target Center right as the half was ending for the Illinois, and who was this against? Every game has literally blended together from the weekend. It was not Ohio State. Who they play in the semis? Nebraska. It was the Illinois-Nebraska game, and Grant literally told us, he goes, man, that was a flashback, listening to him yell at those dudes to the way that Mike Krzyzewski used to yell at us. And, like, Coach K is legendary for, even though, like, his public persona is what it is, he'd get after guys. I just don't understand why with Illinois' team, you've got all this experience, you got all these seniors and, like, guys that have played a lot of college basketball, and they just don't do what they're supposed to do at times. Like Brad Underwood told them to foul at the end of the Ohio State game, they just don't. Like it's kind of mind-boggling, but at the same time, they're really talented, and they played really well in the second half against Nebraska and hung in there against Wisconsin. I thought Wisconsin played well. The final was really a good game. Sometimes the final can be a bit of both teams are tired. No one can make a shot. It's the third or fourth game in 3 or 4 days for most of these teams. So it can be kind of not the best product, but it was a really entertaining game. I think Wisconsin's kind of found some of their juice. Certainly Illinois is a team with as much momentum as anybody going to the NCAA tournament. And Wisconsin's win over Purdue was really, really good for the Badgers. I just thought they wanted it more. They looked like they were so hungry to win that game after actually playing Purdue close twice in the regular season. So, a really entertaining Big Ten tournament. It always is. The crowds were pretty good. The crowd yesterday was good. I was a little bit unsure just because it's a new city and you never know what it's going to be like. It was a good week.
The state of Wisconsin had a great day on Saturday. Between Wisconsin winning, I know Marquette didn't make it, didn't win the championship, but making it to the final. It was a good weekend for the state of Wisconsin. Love seeing that. I just like upsets. Sorry, Robbie. Great game too. I mean, you couldn't ask for more overtime.
Yeah.
Okay, so now all that's behind us, right? Illinois wins the Big Ten men's tournament. Of course, recap here: Iowa won the women's tournament, and now we're into the NCAAs. Meghan, it's pretty much what we predicted in terms of the number of Big Ten teams that are making it into the tournament. Anyone you feel like that got slided simply just not making it in? I mean, Michigan State's in, Maryland's in, and we know Michigan really wanted to get in.
I think the committee gets a lot of flack, and I will give them flack as we continue talking about a couple subjects regarding the tournament. However, they got it right with the amount of women's teams in the tournament. Maryland proved they were an NCAA tournament team by making it to the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament, picked up a big win over Ohio State in the process of that. Michigan State did enough in the regular season to get in. Michigan, another team, made it to the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament. They deserved to be in the NCAA tournament. And obviously Nebraska made that great championship run. So those were 3 bubble-ish teams, if you will, before the Big Ten tournament. 7 deserved to get in. In fact, what's so wild, 12 of the 14 Big Ten teams are actually playing in postseason tournaments when you count the WBIT and the NIT. So pretty cool in that sense. But where the committee really did some people dirty was Iowa is a 1 seed. This is the hardest regional I've ever seen. The 1 seed is Iowa. The 2 seed is UCLA. The 3 seed is LSU. And the 4 seed is Kansas State. Kansas State already beat Iowa earlier in the season. They played twice and split, but Kansas State won at Iowa in that game. UCLA at one time was second in the country, have a great big and Lauren Betts, who's 6'7". LSU, we all know the story there, beat Iowa in the national championship game a season ago. Caitlin Clark is literally driving TV numbers right now. Why would you put her in a position where it is so difficult to get to the Final Four, where you're trying to continue to build off of all this momentum? Or maybe they're just trying to get high TV ratings from the get-go throughout that whole entire week. Very interesting that they put Iowa in such a tough regional. Everybody on ESPN last night, all the analysts talking about how crazy it is that they would put the Hawkeyes in this situation, but nonetheless, it's March Madness, baby, and their attitude in Iowa is to be the best, you have to beat the best.
What about the number 1 seeds overall? I mean, we knew South Carolina, I knew there was going to be a Pac-12 team. USC locked it in with winning the Pac-12 tournament, the last Pac-12 tournament, and then Iowa, you knew it was a Big Ten team, right? I mean, Ohio State, probably the way they performed in the tournament affected that. But Texas, I didn't necessarily see. You think them winning the Big 12 tournament? What?
It had to have been that, because they lost to Oklahoma in the regular. I mean, Oklahoma won that league. So, that's what's a little confusing. But look, I mean, Texas is a team that defends at such a high level that it doesn't surprise me. They were deserving of a potential 1 seed. Stanford was another team that was going to be in the conversation for it. I don't think, with 6 losses, I think Notre Dame would have been hard to make a 1 seed, probably, even though they won their tournament. So I would say they got it right. Ohio State maybe would be your other one that should have been a harder look. But overall, you look at this matchup, I think Ohio State actually has a really good draw. You're going to see them at potential. What I find fascinating is in the second round, potentially, you see Ohio State versus Duke. Celeste Taylor on Ohio State came to the Buckeyes from Duke just last season. That could be really fun and dramatic. But then, you have, a potential Ohio State-UConn matchup, which would be a rematch from a season ago in the Sweet 16, where Ohio State beat UConn. And UConn only has, I think, 8 eligible players for the tournament because of all the injuries they've dealt with. So it's just going to be fascinating all around. But I think Ohio State actually has a pretty solid path to the Final Four.
The women's game is so great, Megan. I mean, we remember when we were growing up, you literally could just fill out the bracket, high seed, high seed, high seed,
All chalk, favorite
yeah.
term.
And so I love that we really have to think, and there's discourse over these matchups. And you get into 2, 3, 4 seeds that are really, really, I mean, you can even go beyond, but I'm just saying it's a toss up. So exciting stuff on the women's side. Robbie, catch us up on the men's side. I mean, we knew UConn, we knew Purdue, Houston, UNC. Do we expect that?
Yeah, because I think the teams that were in the discussion for the 1 really didn't play all that well. Besides Iowa State, Iowa State did have a good Big 12 tournament, but they're the lowest 2. I think they're the lowest 2. So clearly they weren't really all that close to being the 4th number 1. So. North Carolina making the final of the ACC tournament in Washington, D.C. was enough in the committee's eyes. And, I don't think there was any doubt about the top 3, and Carolina grabs that 4th spot.
Which Big Ten team do you think is going to make it the farthest, and why? Based on the path that they have. And this is all of us just jabbing, right? Because you can't predict this stuff, but go ahead.
I mean, I'm going to go Purdue. Because they're a 1 seed, because I actually like their draw. I think, with Utah State, they come from the Mountain West, which is one of the better mid-major conferences in college basketball this year. TCU, very athletic, very battle-tested out of the Big 12. But I do think that neither of those teams really scare Purdue. And then having Gonzaga as the 4 and the 5 with Kansas Gonzaga, that was a bit of a surprise to see them as high as they were at the 5 spot. McNeese is Will Wade. They've won 30 games, which is, Will Wade was at LSU before. He has rebounded quickly since getting back into the game. Kansas is incredibly injured. Kevin McCullough has been banged up. Hunter Dickinson's banged up. I don't feel like Purdue looks at those. They've already beaten Gonzaga. I think both of those are solid matchups for them with the 4-5. Creighton, very talented offensively. Their depth is not great. Ryan Cochran is a really good defensive center. But if they were to make it out and he gets in foul trouble, man, they just have nobody that can guard Zach Edey. And certainly the biggest challenge to Purdue is going to be Tennessee, a team that they've already beat down in Maui, but it was a really physical game. Tennessee will guard you. Dalton Knecht is a really tough matchup. He's one of the best players in all of college basketball. So, but they only see them in the Elite Eight. And when you get there, you're going to play somebody good. Like, you're not getting to the Elite Eight and playing a bunch of bums. So I do like that their path is what it is. And they certainly have plenty to play for and plenty to prove.
You think Nebraska, Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin, either of those teams make it out of that, first weekend?
Into the second weekend? I think Nebraska is intriguing because Houston is so injured that they are so banged up. Now, they're really tough, and the way that they rebound the basketball is a huge concern. And that's going to be a concern for Nebraska in their first-round game against Texas A&M. I did A&M's NCAA Tournament games last year. Well, not game, because they lost to Penn State by like 40 points. And Penn State struggled to rebound. But Penn State ran great offense, a lot like Nebraska, and shot a lot of threes, much like Nebraska. So I'm a little intrigued if Nebraska can beat Texas A&M to see just what they can do against the banged-up Houston team. Michigan State's kind of a toss-up, I think, against Mississippi State. The Bulldogs really guard you. They're one of the better defensive teams in the country this season. And with Michigan State's issues with consistency, that can be a little bit terrifying, but they did make that run last year in the tournament to the Sweet 16. So maybe Tom Izzo has some March magic up his sleeve. Who else did you mention? Northwestern gets FAU. They're gonna have to score because FAU can really score. And certainly with Boo Buie, he's always going to give you a chance, but you do worry, I think, a little bit about just their offensive firepower. You lose Ty Berry. Matthew Nicholson's status is kind of up in the air. So I don't. That's going to be hard. I think FAU Final Four team last year brings everybody back. That would be a really impressive job by Chris Collins, and what's been a really impressive season by him. And then you asked about Wisconsin. James Madison is a tough draw. As we're all Big Ten fans. We know what they did to Michigan State first game of the year. They've had a tremendous season. They shoot the basketball. That's a very trendy upset pick. But I do think the Badgers are playing really well. And I thought that they were playing better to finish the season. I saw them at Purdue on the last day of the regular season. They gave them everything that they wanted. And obviously getting to the final of the Big Ten tournament is a good weekend for them. So I'm not so quick to pick James Madison. I think Wisconsin can win that game and get to the second weekend. But certainly they'll be tested there.
So in summary, you have no idea.
Yeah. That's the beauty of this, though.
I know.
Every year, my friends are like, fill out a bracket for me. And I'm like, my bracket is trash. I filled one out
because you're almost too informed.
Well, I think also you get biased to who you see. I think when you see teams over and over again, you're like, oh, yeah, they're pretty good. Having really no concept for some of the other teams that you don't see.
The best brackets are the people that really aren't putting that much thought into it, because you got to pick a dark horse. We never know who's going to – like, no one would have picked the Purdue upset last year. No one.
Other than the FDU fans that are just filling out brackets because for fun.
Yeah. It's so – okay, Megan, let's give you some time here. On the women's side, I mean, you talked about how Iowa has a tough road. And part of me is like, all right, if they get through that, then they'll be gravy. But it's like, no, South Carolina. And it's it just seems like they've got the gauntlet to try to even get back to that championship game.
Yeah, look, on the women's side, you look at South Carolina this season, I just don't know anyone that could beat them. They shoot 40% from three as a team. They've got a 6'8" player in Camelia Cardoso who no one can guard, and she is a huge shot blocker in the paint. They have depth. They have experience. Like, there's just, I don't know who can beat them right now. You've seen teams get close, but
and the one Achilles heel that South Carolina had was that they couldn't shoot. Now they can.
And now they can. And like, Tahina Pow is wow. Anyways, Fairfield just had them this weekend. They're really good. Carly Thibault-Dudonis was an assistant at Minnesota for years, so she's familiar with Indiana. That could be a really fun matchup. Oklahoma is a team that I'm also been very impressed with. They have a lot of youth, and they just have a lot of depth as well, so that's going to be interesting. If Indiana can stay healthy, they become a really difficult team to beat. Nebraska, A&M. I mean, Nebraska is a team that's playing with a ton of momentum right now, and they have such balance inside and outside. They could really potentially make a run to Sweet 16, but Oregon State and Corvallis is going to be interesting. And that's the thing with these women's tournaments. For those who don't know, the top 4 seeds in each region host at home the first and second round. So huge advantage to hosting. But listen, this is, if you go, somebody asked me last night, South Carolina or the field. I'm taking South Carolina right now, just with how well they've been playing. And that's not by any means going out on a limb, but right now. And then the key to all of this, it's matchups and staying healthy. So if you can do both those things and like have a pretty favorable bracket, then you're in a good spot.
For sure. Let's finish this with our favorite part of the tournament. Like, does anyone, I mean, I'll go first. Not that this is like rocket, but it's just the moments.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was watching highlights of Arike Gumbawale the other day. Like, you know, you get buzzer beaters and game winners in the semifinal and the champion. Like, you can't beat that stuff. The upsets, I'm taking all of the answers right now, but jump in if you want, Megan, then you go, Robbie.
Yeah, I think the upsets about that, like what I love about the tournament and what's different than any other like run to a championship in any other sport is the fact that like it's one and done, because the best teams will win in a series. Like the best team will come out on top. But like the idea that the underdog, a 16 seed, can beat a 1 seed and just like keep on winning. Like there is nothing more thrilling than working all year long to win an NCAA, to make the tournament and then to win an NCAA tournament game. Like you're putting everything that you have into one day or one game. And that to me, like, is such a beautiful thing and something that I know those who have experienced it cherish more than anything.
Yeah, I'm with both you guys on the upsets, except when it's your own school, then it stinks. But it is, you know, basketball with the 3-point line, with foul trouble. It's not like football where, all right, the more physical, the more dominant team is probably going to win. Like, you don't see upsets like that in college football. Not that there aren't some, but you just see, you know, FDU is like a 25-point underdog to Purdue last year, and they win. Like, that's crazy. I love the first 2 days. I love Thursday and Friday. I love that the games like rapid fire off. I love that they start at the weirdest times and they send them out to site like approximately 8:27 p.m. And you're like, that is the most random start time ever. But I've thought that's so funny since I was a kid. I just love the NCAA tournament. I really do. But it is a strange event where everything else, at least to me, the culmination is always the finals, the NBA finals, the Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup. But for the NCAA tournament, I think even though I love the Final Four, I think my favorite 2 days are Thursday and Friday, which is really weird. It's a really weird way to look at the end of a season, but maybe that's the fact that I grew up a Bryce Drew and Valparaiso fan and Valparaiso ball boy, so that was really their time to shine. They weren't probably going to make the Final Four, but yeah, it's an amazing event, and it's the best time of the year.
I agree, and specifically on the men's side, like those first 2 days are when you get to like, wait, who just won? And it's so funny that you bring up those random times, because like as kids, part of the reason we love the tournament for what it is, but part of it is because we got to watch TV during school, right?
Yes.
And they put up the games, specifically if it was a school in the area. Like I grew up in Northern Virginia when George Mason made its run, and it was like the biggest thing. I mean, Megan, you know this too. It was like the biggest thing going on. So it has, sports brings people together, but specifically when you've got underdogs. I do want to make sure that we shout out the Golden Eagles, Marquette, our producer Dan. I'm sure he's got some dog in the fight there. And yeah, may the best team win. I've got absolutely, but Meghan, you've got a dog in the fight. Northwestern's in it on the men's side. Robbie, of course, with Purdue. So good luck to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's it for us. We may be back depending on how some of these Big Ten teams do. See you in a few.
Go big or go home.